Ramesh Babu Praggnanandhha, that's the name for today to remember. Ladies and gentlemen, I am back for you with the second day recap of the Chessable Masters. It's been a very long 24 hours for me because I was doing live commentary between 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. At my time, and I'm looking to do the exact same today. So yeah, the sleep pattern has been messed up, but that's okay because it's done for the sake of chess. And chess, we have seen a lot of fun chess indeed, and one of them was indeed the Indian prodigy and his victory over Magnus Carlsen. So spoiler alert, too late now, but obviously these games have been already seen, so I'm not really spoiling anything. Let's have a look at what happened, because drama was again definitely present, which by the way is definitely to be expected in a 15-minute game. It's very unlikely that one would get through without at least minor mistakes. So let's see how it went. We started off with a Archangel setup from the world champion, and Pragg is playing the solid d3 c3 setup instead of the ambitious d4 one. It has become very popular lately, including the bishop g5 idea, which by the way was played by Magnus Carlsen himself against none other than Ding Liren, who is also in the field. So yeah, we're still following trodden path. Kramnik, Grishuk, Alexeyev, just to mention a few, played like this with white. And a4 was the first move that stirred this game towards new territory. The common move was knight d2, which fits very well into the structure, and the knight gets rerouted towards e3. a4 is a different concept where white wants to tickle the b5 pawn, and Magnus immediately prepares to meet that with rook b8. Of course, there is also this a-file annoyance to deal with, so after ab can't be played because the rook would be hanging. So take knight a3, and that's the point. To hold back the knight on b1 is to come via a3 and once again put a bit of pressure on that pawn on b5. g5, bishop b3, knight a5. Magnus played out these moves reasonably quickly, but guess what? Pragg was even quicker, who at this stage was still up on the clock. So you would assume that all this was some kind of a prep. b4, according to the engine, a minor mistake by the world champion, allowing the check first and then take, although this shouldn't make a big difference, with bishop a4. And here after bishop d7, Pragg missed the chance to pull ahead with h4, g4, then takes, a very cool in-between move, and only after bishop takes back, drop back to d2, when this knight is en route to c4, and the b4 pawn is not so easy to rake back. And on top of that, a very important motif to keep in mind here is pawn h5, which is going to allow white to reroute this bishop back onto the spin. A very powerful concept, and so Pragg would be playing on both wings effectively. Instead, he went knight c4, which allowed this cleanup rather easily for Magnus. And now it seems to be like a decent position for white still, because the black king is rather insecure, and it's not so easy to find a productive plan for black. So at this point, I really thought that Carlsen was in some kind of a practical trouble, even if the position is objectively okay. And this trouble actually followed throughout the entire middle game, but somehow Pragg couldn't quite cash in on this. Apparently knight takes b6 was inaccurate. The engine loves the readout of the knight, and so do I. It looks very attractive. And if we could force the bishop trade here rather than on b6, then perhaps the f-file could become a battleground where we would be pulling ahead a little bit. Maybe rook c1 first and then do the same. There are variations of this idea available. The idea behind rook c1, by the way, is to try to wait for the knight to come to c5 and then play for d4 after a capture on b6, or even just take b6, rook c3, and eventually play for d4. Anyway, the exciting thing started popping up hereabouts. So when we were commentating the game with the fabulous Danny King, we thought that white had some very, very decent practical chances here, despite the engine constantly giving us a dead draw, or rather a dead equal assessment. And it's a very important thing to distinguish, by the way, that if you don't play a certain line or a position because the engine says it's equal, but you look at it and it's not apparent at all how it's equal, then you're doing a disservice to yourself, because this position typically is something that I would never ever want to play with black, because it looks unpleasant and awkward. Even if the engine tells me it's totally fine, I just am not feeling okay with this, and therefore I would probably lose these games rather than holding them, because if you don't feel happy with what you played, then you are likely to make a mistake. Take was played, and here now the situation is getting clearer, and that here actually Danny told me a concept that I never really verbalized the way he did it, and I thought it was such an instructive concept. When we saw this f4 idea coming into the game, we started thinking about variations where this f file might be opening up, and white can potentially double up on the f file. And then he made a comment about the separated rocks. I don't even know if that was the wording he used. It was definitely not disconnected, but something, maybe disconnected rocks was the terminology, which is very, very powerful here, because the rook on b6 is actually not really fulfilling any duties as far as the king side or the center is concerned. So its only job now is to attack b2, but I'm not sure if that's gonna cut it. And here we felt that Pragg actually played a little bit recklessly. b4 was really good. I think this is a great idea, but after rook b8, f5 push just didn't feel quite right. It felt like he cashed in too soon. I would have liked to see something like rook e1, adding a little bit more tension to the position rather than releasing said tension, and perhaps now still keeping e5 in the on the cards rather, or even queen c4 pinning said knight, creating f5 to be a winning threat would have been clearer. Now what's really impressive is that Magnus equalizes from here like an absolute champ. Funny that he's won after all. With, by the way, 40 seconds on the clock, he neutralizes now white's initiative remarkably beautifully. He reroutes the knight to f7 from where it is capable of jumping to e5, blocking of the bishop. And when it just looks like c7 is too difficult to defend, he just jettisons the pawn and immediately offers an endgame scenario which he wouldn't have any trouble holding with black. The position has simplified, the e4 pawn is weak, and the black pawns are beautifully guarded. So marvelous defense by the world champ here. h4 was thrown in just to keep the tension, but essentially black is completely fine here. And that's really the drama of the situation, because Magnus really came back from a slightly worse position into this endgame where any move, really any move, you name it, is going to be successful to hold the draw. d5, outstanding move, utilizing the sideways pin on the h4 bishop. King f1 takes, bishop takes f6, and now any knight move, knight d3, knight c4, anything just holds the position. But with 13 seconds left on the clock, Magnus goes for knight g4, and tragedy struck, rook g7 check, and that is all she wrote. You could say that the constant pressure that he had to endure throughout the game caught up with him. That is a quite likely narrative for a game like this, when you keep on defend, and then eventually you manage to come around and equalize. You're still under the tremendous pressure psychologically, and it can easily lead to a blunder like that. A beautiful variation that I really liked for black here was knight d3. Hang on a second. Bishop takes f6. No, that's not my variation. What was my variation? Knight d3. Yeah, it was knight d3. I was trying to... Yeah, there was a line where this knight came back to... how was it? Let's go with check. I think it was something like I tried to make this work. Yeah, that's right. And here after check, king here, we have check. And if king f2, we have pawn e3 check. And now the pawn is immune to the check takes on f6, which is still draw, by the way, because white eventually captures h6. But it goes to show that bringing the knight in would have secured a very easy draw, and instead Carlsen drops the ball in the very last moment. Chess is a really cruel game, because one mistake like this will cost you the entire game. A huge scalp for the young Indian, definitely something that is going to boost his morale for the remaining of the tournament. Speaking of the tournament, by the way, the dark horse, Chinese Grandmaster Wei Yi, is absolutely killing it. Just playing really rock-solid chess, winning game after game, and in fact leading the tournament after 2 days. I'm very curious how far he will be able to go. So yeah, be sure that you tune in tonight / this afternoon, depending on where you are on this marvelous planet, because there is a lot more fun to be watched and enjoyed. We are going to be covering again the games with Grandmaster Daniel King, so be sure to follow us there. Please make sure to like, to comment, to sub, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.